My guest today on Country Fried Rock is JD Wilkes. Yep, that name's probably familiar to Country Fried Rock listeners. He was with us a few years ago after his book came out about Kentucky barn dances and jamborees. He also had a record not terribly too long before that with the Dirt Daubers. But most of us probably know him from his years with the legendary Shack Shakers. Well, it's always something new with JD Wilkes. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Your upcoming debut solo album, Fire Dream, is a joy to listen to. And I kind of can't believe this is the first time you've done a solo record.
Well, in a way, it's the first one I've given this amount of energy to. I have done banjo records and things like that before, basically recorded, with tape recorders or with my phone. But, I'd really put it out into it for a very lo-fi, old-time banjo record called Cattle in the Cane, and then before that, I put out something with kitchen tapes. But they were, it wasn't like a studio effort. It was basically like I was field recording myself.
Right.
Yes, this is the first real studio solo record I've ever done.
Well, that's pretty cool to have such a history to pull from, which, of course, history is a huge part of what you do.
Yeah. Well, you could say that maybe the JD Wilkes and the Dirt Daubers was everything that I do. It's sort of like a solo record in a way. I do exactly what I want. I do the writing and all that. But this was where I parted ways with all Dirt Daubers, all Shack Shakers, and started afresh with a whole new group. Bruce Watson's idea, was to kind of like get me out of my usual comfort zone. So
I actually was not familiar with his name, although my first thought was, Bruce Watson from Big Country? That guy?
It's a pretty common name, but no, Bruce, he's the president or the co-founder, president of Fat Possum Records. People might know that label because it was a great blues label. And a lot of wonderful sort of field recordings like the Mississippi Blues Guys. That's what Bruce did when he was kind of a young man. He went out and field recorded guys like T-Model, Ford, and R.L. Burnside, and Junior Kimbrough, all these great records that we take for granted now.
Cool stuff on Fat Possum.
Yeah, he was just out there dialing Lomax as a teenager. So that's who the Bruce Watson I'm talking about is. And now, he's the guy behind the success of the Black Keys and John Spencer, and he's one of the guys at least. But he's still keeping it real and keeping it true to the roots thing on the Big Legal Mess label, which is his imprint. That's what my solo record is coming out on.
Which, by the way, is my favorite record label name ever.
Yeah, I know. I hope it isn't an omen in any way for me.
No. I think it's hilarious. It's kind of like if you wear your raincoat, you can prevent it from raining.
Right, exactly. It's like being inoculated against it, hopefully.
Well, okay, so how did you and Bruce Watson initially connect?
Well, he got a hold of me. He got a hold of that barn dance book, and he really liked it. Our last interview was about that book.
Yeah.
Me and you. And he liked that I was kind of doing the Lomax thing, too, or at least some sort of junior anthropological, cultural thing like that. Basically, I think I reminded him of himself in a way in that regard, as far as caring about the old timers and caring to record them and to carry on some aspect of what they did so that, they would all be left in vain. Somebody has to do it. And another thing, when he was a young man, he was a little boy, he would come to Paducah, Kentucky, which is the town I live in. He grew up coming over here because this was the big city.
No kidding.
He grew up in Missouri, at the Boot Heel of Missouri. The place to go on a Saturday night was Paducah. So he always had a fond memory of where I live, and so he decided to come make a vacation and meet me, and we hit it off, and we were just talking about music and art. I tried to sell him on putting out a Shack Shakers record. He goes, I don't like the Shack Shakers. I like you, JD.
Okay, then.
Yeah, he was a fan of the Shack Shakers. He liked me, but I'm like, it's the same thing, I don't know. Bruce he's like that, but he knows what he likes and he knows what he doesn't like. And now I see what he meant, because this is not a Shack Shakers record.
No, it's not.
It's something new.
Many, many years ago, I interviewed this songwriter from Athens, Georgia, who did a studio-only project. The band was called Driftwood. It was like a bluegrass all-stars band. And the album they did was called Wanderlust. And it was based on 10 years of research he had done about traveling carnivals in the South in the 40s and 50s.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. They call that the Sawdust Trail is the name of that sort of thing. Yeah. I even worked in sideshow stuff myself. So, yeah. I didn't put 10 years of research into it. That's amazing.
Well, this guy was just obsessed with it. And he remembered going to him as a little kid, and he just decided he was going to write this whole full concept album about it. But listening to your album with Fire Dream and just remembering the historical research that went into this other guy's record, and then kind of maybe a little bit of like Threepenny Opera sort of gypsy carnival. It's a very visual record, I guess would be the way of saying that. Right.
Well, that's what I was going for. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we did put out the Yep Rock records. There were 3 of them. And so of course, you know me, I have to make everything like thematic and grand. And so I had to make those records a trilogy, you know, taking you on this epic, you know, trilogy saga, you know. But one of the records, Pan Delirium, I think it was the one in the middle, had a carnival theme to it. And there seems to be kind of a carnival theme that runs off and on in my writing too, because it is kind of like one of the strange Southern things that spark the imagination. And there's all these opportunities to write colorful lyrics to describe it. And the music is really fiery and passionate, and you know, that gypsy stuff. I always said that gypsy music is the blues of Europe. It has the same sort of notes and tones and overtones of pain. There are these mournful notes in it, just like in klezmer and gypsy music. It's the same sort of thing. That's their blues. That's their sort of ethnic sound of pain and suffering over the years, but it has this beauty to it. So, you know, we have blues over here as a sort of our version of it, but also, you know, it kind of worked its way into Spanish music and Caribbean music, and we have that in America too. So that's what I love about American music, that we sort of can mix it all up.
I love klezmer music. There's a band I've seen several times, also coincidentally out of Athens. It's like Klezmer Local 42 or something. I love them.
It's beautiful music, you know, and it's very soulful, and there's a Southern Gothic quality to it also. And I know which of those things as a kid too. I know what he's talking about. It's something really strange, like a hot summer night in the South when the carnival blows into town. You know, the more rinky-dink and pathetic, the better. I love it.
It's somewhat akin to, they used to set up, here in the Carolinas, it was a big thing to have like parking lot wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
Or like, you know, your local like high school arena kind of location. Yeah. Those were always better than these great big WWE style shows. Oh, yeah. We have the backyard wrestling in Kentucky. There's a great documentary on that called Fire in the Mountains. Basically, they're just setting up folding tables in the backyard as their ring that they fight on. Yeah, and it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I befriended a couple of guys who did that, and I was like, how did this become what you do? And they were like, I've always loved this. You know, my granddad used to take me or something like that. Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about. When we played in the Carolinas, they would have a ring set up in the club, and they had they had all their characters and the heel section and all the stuff you'd expect. But then they tear it all down, and then we play. But it was all inside, and they're like, you know, once they have the ring erected inside the club, you know, they're basically up to the ceiling, you know. It's a whole different world. It really is. Yeah. You use a word that I want to ask about, and I want to be respectful of the fact that I genuinely don't understand. Okay. So I did live in Kentucky for 5 years, but I lived in Lexington and worked in Eastern Kentucky. Paducah is far west, way west by time-wise. Mm-hmm. But you use a term regularly, and I've seen some other interviews with you where you use it, that I would love to have you expand on a little more, and that is hillbilly and hillbilly culture. Okay. Because for you, that's not an insult. Well, there's many different theories. It's also, we were talking about inoculation earlier. It's like a big legal mess. So we're inoculating ourselves from any trouble there. Hillbilly is it's like the H word, that you can call yourself that, but if someone else calls you that, it's not good. But it depends on the tone. But hillbilly or Hill William, these are terms like by this point, it's sort of like a badge of honor. Originally it was a slur, and it could still be a slur depending on who's saying it. Got it. I heard, this is in the Barn Dance book,
but I'm quoting another history book that it was a term, and I'm not even sure if I really believe this, but it is one of the theories of where the term came from. Hillbillies were the tobacco farmers from this part of the country that sold out to the Duke Tobacco Trust. And so they were the scabs. So it was a bad word in that regard originally, but then the term kind of took off. But I don't know if I believe that, but that is one theory that one historian claims. I want to say that it goes back further than that, but what do I know? It's like, redneck pride, or you can call someone a redneck. I'm not a redneck, or someone might call themselves, I'm a redneck. And, depends on the attitude and who's saying it, I guess.
Knowing your music, I know that you're not using it in a pejorative manner. And so I was like, you never want to talk about someone else's culture when you're not familiar about it.
Yeah, I don't have any guilt over saying hillbilly. That's been put to rest a long time ago. And I'm from Kentucky. I would want to make fun of myself or my family. I mean, right. I'm obviously not attacking. I don't even consider myself appropriating anything if I come by naturally and grew up with it. I mean, yeah, it's not pejorative at all. Yes, it originated as a slur, but by this point, I think there's some people that are like proud about it.
Right.
I talked to Stacy Sexton, whose grandfather is a banjo player that I go out to Letcher County, Kentucky, to get lessons from time to time, and I'm friends with his granddaughter Stacy, and we talk about things like this. Cool. It's just basically like watch who you call one, but we call ourselves that, and then now it isn't just necessarily the Appalachian people or the Smoky Mountain people. So I don't know. I think by this point, it's kind of a fun word for me. Rockabilly, the term rockabilly hillbilly is implied to that. Hillbilly music and race records, that's the two types of music you could buy. Race records, I mean, is that something we really want to say either, Right. But it's all, we just absorbed this into like our lexicon over time, and we understand the context now. To me, it's not a big deal, but if somebody came and called me, I was born in Texas and raised in Kentucky, and, and to them, I look like an inbreed hick, or if they say, you hillbilly, you, and with a frown on their face, they're going to get some trouble. But then I love hillbilly music, which is just a genre, rockabilly, right, psychobilly. I think it's all good. All
of this, not beating a dead horse, but you do have hillbilly gypsy. There's a lot going on in that, as you were talking about earlier, with the influences from klezmer and everything else.
That is a description. There's no title on the record of hillbilly gypsy, but it is a kind of a mashup of two different styles that I'm going for there. The Southern sideshow containing elements of both that Southern Gothic hillbilly style and then also the nature of the carnival having this sort of gypsy old world European history. Mash those two things up. You kind of got an awesome musical alchemy going on there. To
kind of wrap it back around, Bruce Watson got in touch with you. You all kind of talked stuff out. What was the process for writing for this record with Bruce being clear? Kind of from the beginning of the conversation, it sounds like we're not making a Shack Shakers record here.
Right, yeah. Well, we also recorded a lot of country music, straight up country music. I brought these songs in. I wrote all the tunes, or they are covers. But, it had to pass the Bruce test, you know what I mean? Basically, it was, we could go in two different directions. This sort of more Tom Waitsy carnival. Definitely. Kentucky version of that.
I hear that completely.
Yeah, or we could go on the honky-tonk, danceable, more straight-ahead country rock, because I had a bunch of songs written like that. And I was like, it's up to you, Bruce. It's like there was enough songs of each to make a record that could go either way. We could have made two different records. In fact, we go back and release probably that we took off and have a whole other album out by the end of the year, But he wanted to do the more art-damaged hillbilly carnival records. I'm like, okay, that sounds good to me. But it sounds like something the Shack Shakers would have done a long time ago, too. But I bit my tongue and we put it out. Yeah, the theme of it being that is very Shack Shakery, but the personnel that play on it end up making it something brand new, and that's what just blows my mind to play it back. Yeah, it's not a Shack Shakers record. It's like Shack Shakery ideas, but with we're bringing out the big guns.
Right. Well, yeah, speaking of which, so we'll start with a fellow Country Fried Rock alum in Jimbo Mathus, who you said both played percussion and produced.
He did, yeah. He played a little guitar. He played some organ. Well, he's kind of a jack of all trades, as you know, and of course he's a great singer. He's a great backup singer. on this record, he's wonderful. Just sort of a utility guy and a genius and a great percussionist. Who knew? I didn't know that. I always thought of him as, the great frontman of the Squirrel Nut Zippers and blues guitarist, but I didn't know that he was so good on rhythm.
When he was first talking about putting together his own sort of studio and then recording with others, he was getting ready to work with a fellow Country Fried Rock alum, Roscoe, Eric Gamble. And I know they've got a long-term partnership there, but that's when I first discovered all these other things that Jimbo does.
Right. Oh, my goodness. He's the hardest working man in the show business. I think that slot cleared up. I think he can be that guy now. So he's amazing.
How did the personnel come together of the other folks that you brought in?
Bruce, he brought him in. So he wanted to get Matt Patton of Drive-By Truckers to play bass. He used to play the horns. He basically like guys he's worked with on other records that are kind of on call if he's got a project going on and they're nearby in Water Valley or Memphis or somewhere close by. It's like they got their own little like Nashville world, not Nashville. It's like kind of like Muscle Shoals is, the Water Valley, Memphis, Fat Possum guys. They all work together. It's like everywhere you go. Like even in Paducah, we have the people you call if you're going to make a record up in Paducah. Right. Who you're going to get, who the talent is. Matt Patton's one of those guys, and Jimbo brought in this guy called Dr. Sick, who played all the fiddle and electric guitar and other incidental utility instruments, and he steals the show. It's kind of almost his record too. He's so amazing on this radio. I'm not worthy. He is the guy in the Squirrel Nut Zippers. He's another zipper. And he's basically the guy that took Andrew Bird's place in that band. So, but I tell you what, I think he's better. I mean, as far as he's like a savant. I mean, he played anything you're hearing on that record that's electric guitar or violin or fiddle. I mean, that's Dr. Sick, and you want to memorize that name because he is. You'll be hearing a lot from him because he's new in the Zippers, but I'll tell you what, might be the most amazing, talented musician I've ever played with. And I lived in Nashville for 13 years, so.
Man, that playing is central to this record.
It is, yeah. Thank goodness they brought him in. It was like bringing in, the bringer. It's like, okay, now we're going to bring in, the heavyweight champion of the world. And it was like this unfair advantage bringing this guy. So I never met him before, but he knew the Shack Shakers. He's also a ringmaster, sort of a sideshow talker for burlesque acts. And so he's the one that goes out there. Yeah, I mean, he's got this booming operatic voice. It's perfect for backup singing, and his talent knows no end, and it really is one of the most amazing. I said between him and Greg Gehring, I can't think of who is more talented. I'd put them both up against one another any day, and that would be an amazing head-cutting match right there. So, Dr. Sick, write that down.
He was a new one to me, so I'm glad.
Yeah. And the thing is I don't know his real name. he just disappeared. And where'd he go? Was he ever really there? Yeah, he was awesome.
So how did the sessions go then? Was each person just coming in and doing their parts, or how did that work?
No, we all played at the same time. It was all performance based. We would go back and add some things like horns. It's like 2 or 3 songs on the record. We're actually standing around one microphone. Like absolutely old school bluegrass style. Otherwise we're all mic'd up in a studio, but still performing together at the same time. There might be, I missed that note on the banjo. I'm gonna go back and punch that. Little things like that. It was very, very much organically recorded, which the last 2 records, I'm proud to say that both the last Shack Shakers record and this are recorded that way. So,
well, so speaking of which, you're obviously known for your performances, specifically when you're fronting with the Shack Shakers. What is touring going to look like for this record?
Well, I was hesitant to tap the Shack Shakers to back me. I thought maybe I'd have to put a whole new band together to represent this solo record, It's like starting to get panic attacks thinking about that. Who am I going to get? Then Bruce says, JD, just take the shack shakers out with you. It's like, I said, would that be okay? He's like, yes. You don't have to like reinvent your live thing all the way down to the personnel. Just use the shack shakers. I was like, oh, thank you, Bruce. Because it is a JD Wilkes record. We're going to tour as JD Wilkes, and then in parentheses with legendary shack shakers. But get this, we're going to be unplugged this year.
Whoa.
And yeah, you haven't seen that before, have you?
No.
Acoustic shack shakers, those acoustic shack shakers in parentheses under my name. So hope that's not too confusing for everybody. But I just think here's an opportunity for us to get weird and artsy with this carnival music, this hillbilly gypsy music. You know what I mean? Like we can milk it for all the weird overtones and you know, come out there. And we've got the Tom Thumb piano, which is the 64 key piano. But,
yep.
You know, it's not like Schroeder piano or anything. It's like it's not that little. No, it's a real piano, and we're going to have it side stage so I can go over there and like do the whole like crooked 2-beat thing that you'd hear coming out of a calliope or something.
Yep. And
yeah, you know, I do Bible Candle and Skull, and there's a couple other songs off the solo record that are perfect for it. You know, otherwise playing banjo and playing harmonica with the shack shakers all standing around me, standing all like almost like a bluegrass band huddled up there. Just see what happens, you know, because the sky's the limit. Just make this a whole new thing, you know, if we want.
That brought a couple of things to mind. I noticed, at least in February, there's a few dates with, speaking of weird and wonderful, Unknown Hinson, I believe.
Yeah. Now, on that run, I'm just going to have my bass player with you. We're just going to do a little duo thing. Because all of this stuff that I'm telling you and I'm going on and on and on about, it kind of came to me late. Bruce's blessing to use the shackers came late. So these dates are getting booked, though, as just JD Wilkes, like literally just you, just JD. Solo as solo could be. And I've been like, then we had the idea, it's like, oh, wait, what if we did this? And he's like, well, I already booked all that. It's just you, JD. It's like, oh, okay, shoot. Well, how about this? And so I gotta get the booking agent up to speed on my ideas.
Got it. About
this new thing. So now by the time, but it won't be till March before y'all get to see this.
That means that we need to see a couple of different dates on this run, or this set of runs coming up, because it's going to be different.
It will be, yeah, that's right. And yeah, so the Unknown Hinson thing, that'll be me and my bass player just going down there and just kind of jamming and we might do some Dirt Daubers songs, some Shack Shaker songs, just old time music and things like that. Mm-hmm. It's more like those earlier quote unquote solo records I put out of like old time music, you know. Yeah, we're just gonna go jam.
That's gonna be cool. Just to clarify, you mentioned a couple of times in reference to the Tom Thumb keyboard referencing the calliope sound. Okay, I feel a need to clarify that calliope is not just the thing that crashes to the ground in the Bruce Springsteen song. It references back to that whole carnival thing of the steam-powered... Yeah, it's that very specific sound.
Yeah, it's calipes are like there's a steam-driven, like there's no pipes in the Tom Thumb piano. I just mean it's kind of going to sound kind of crooked and out of tune and Tom Waitsy, and you know, you got to see this thing. It's like 100 years old. It literally is 100 years old piano. It's just not 88 keys like a regular piano. It's 64, so like your scale is shorter, but it's like the same. Basically, you sit at it like a piano. It's got the hammers and the strings inside, and it weighs a ton. We got to like pack it around all the time and lift it up into the back of the van. But I think it's going to be worth it. Yeah, it's a great. It's almost like the fifth member of the band now.
That'll be very. My grandmother had one. That's the only reason I even know what it is.
Yeah, Tom Thumb. Yeah, it's cool. And you know the history behind where they came from? I found this out.
No, I don't.
You know what Tin Pan Alley is? That was the area of New York where they wrote songs. Well, all the little songwriters, they had these tiny rooms that they would be in, what you call them, the little studio rooms, where they would all be in there on their pianos writing songs. These cubicles. There were so many songwriters in a row in these buildings, and there was only so much space in those cubicles for them to write on. They had to make these tiny pianos for them to fit in these cubicles. And that's where the Tom Thumb piano came in. Yeah, but who knows what songs were maybe written on your grandma's piano or mine, you know, because that's kind of where they came out of.
How did you get it?
Well, at eBay.
Cool. That's where all good things come from, or bad.
Right, yeah. But mine's painted red and has like a sort of a Chinese scene on it. So I don't know. Mine might have come out of a Chinese restaurant from 100 years ago. Who knows? Or it was repainted or something. Mine looks really good under lights because it's red. And like I said, it's like the fifth member of the band, Tom Thumb on piano.
On piano.
Is piano.
Tom Thumb as piano.
There you go. That's it.
Well, that is very cool. I'd catch at least a couple of these dates. You're heading within my general area a couple times.
Yeah, and I would be heading for the West Coast in March and April by the time this grander, larger idea manifests itself. The southern run I'm doing is going to be just a good old jam, like the Barn Dance book and all that stuff. But we're going to get, I think, Fuller Condon, a Carolinian, a South Kakalaki guy from Charleston, the two-man gentleman man councilman who's been a shack shaker for a couple of years now. He's going to join me on this, so we're going to go out with unknown Hinson and circle back around after Florida and come up your way. Yeah, that'll be fun.
Well, neat. So is there anything else on deck with this upcoming album, Fire Dream, or any other books or anything like that you would like to address?
I put out a novel last year called The Vine That Ate the South. It's my second book, and it did pretty well for itself as far as critical acclaim goes. It's getting translated into French and now Polish.
Whoa.
Which is weird.
That's cool.
Yeah. I don't know. Do they know anything about the South over there?
I have no idea.
Who knows? Maybe we'll have to educate them. But then there's also an audio book, and so NPR said some really great stuff about it. So that, The Vine That Ate the South is like the latest book I've got out. But other than that, I think we're all caught up here.
That is very cool. Well, JD Wilkes, definitely looking forward to everyone getting a chance to hear Fire Dream. And as always, people should go see your shows.
Oh, well, bless your heart. Appreciate it, Sloan. And thanks for chatting with me.
My pleasure. Safe travels.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.